Welcome to Health, Wellbeing and Lifestyle, where experts in the field inform, educate and inspire the community to be healthier, more balanced and live the lifestyle they love. Our first guest today, Michèle Wolff, is a naturopath, author and lecturer, and the topic we'll be discussing is constipation and other digestive health issues. Welcome, Michèle.
Thank you, Megan.
So, Michèle, constipation is a very common problem. Could you describe the cause of constipation?
Yeah, sure. There are several causes which are lifestyle causes because of the modern day lifestyle. The number one cause is a lack of water. So if you are somebody that has a very active lifestyle and you perspire a lot or you go in saunas, you're going to need more water than someone else. But the amount of water you need is also based on your body weight. It's also based on how much salt you have in your diet as well. But on average, if you times your body weight in kilograms by 33, you'll get the amount of mils of water that you should have. And best to have that water warm rather than cold, it hydrates better. The second would be lack of fibre in the diet. So a lot of us have junk food, more white products in the diet, more refined food, white rice rather than brown rice, and so on. So increasing your fibre through whole foods, so that would be more green leafy vegetables, whole grains like brown rice, quinoa, buckwheat. If you're someone that tolerates wheat, brown bread rather than white bread. A breakfast that I would commonly prescribe is oat bran, which is very fibrous, mixed with hot water with some figs and some chia seeds and some LSA, and that's a really, really good fibre to get the bowel moving. If it's not resolved by that, then look at exercise. So we've become very sedentary in our lifestyle compared to how much we're supposed to move, and the body needs to move in order for the bowel to move. If you haven't got a certain period of time for normal exercise, then you can invest in like a small trampoline or a lymphocyzer, it's often called. Bounce up and down while you're watching television. That's really good exercise for the gut. And the other thing I would say is that we're actually not designed to sit on the toilets in the position that we sit in. So in countries like Asia and in France, a lot of the toilets are holes in the ground and the bottom part of your bowel opens right up when you're squatting. So there are several companies that have squatting stools that go around toilets that can make a considerable difference to constipation and easy passage from the bowel. After that, the next most important thing would be probiotics. So probiotics are often known as bifidus and lactobacillus as the main ones, but there are over 700 recorded species now. And they come from foods like plain yogurt. There's a Balkan drink called kefir, which has huge amounts of probiotics. That's readily available in health food shops, or you can make it yourself. And having foods like sauerkraut, so fermented cabbage as an example, small amounts with the meals. If you've addressed all of those and there's still constipation, then have a look at your stress levels. So that can have a big impact on the bowel with the mind-gut connection. So if you're holding on to emotions, often the bowel can hold on and you can be constipated. If you've got a lot of worry that's going over a period of time, that can often hold on the bowel. So there are specific lifestyle techniques that you can do to release that stress. If it's more complicated, you might want to see a professional counsellor or psychotherapist to help release that. And I would use specific herbs for the gut-brain connection and to relax the gut and calm the mind. So stress has quite a big impact There can be more serious illnesses like hypothyroid that can cause.
What problems does constipation cause to the body?
So it can cause a lot of very uncomfortable symptoms. Bloating is a big one, which can be really uncomfortable for people. Sometimes it causes excessive gas. It causes a sluggishness, particularly in the brain, from the endotoxins going around in the body and the body just not being cleared, and the pressure on the body. If you're very constipated, it also causes a lot of pressure on the heart, and it can make you feel quite unhappy and quite down if it goes on, both from the uncomfortable feeling and the toxins not being passed. So you've got an unhealthy fermentation that goes on in the gut. So, you know, every 24 to 48 hours, the food should be moving out of the gut. It's like a rubbish bin that needs to be moved out, not causing recirculating toxins and mind problems. It can also cause problems with sleep. So some people wake up in the night because their gut is uncomfortable. With some people, it can cause swollen glands because the fluids are just not moving through the body. And you'd be more prone to, like if you're somebody that suffers with eczema, for example, it will be worse when you're constipated because, because the toxins are not free flowing out of the body.
Do you have any tips for our viewers for some healthy eating?
Yeah, so there's lots of tips for healthy eating as far as constipation goes. So having enough fibre is very important. So always have your whole grains, so brown rice instead of white rice. Every grain you have a whole grain. Green leafy vegetables. Your 1 tablespoon of chia seeds a day can be amazing. A teaspoon of ground flax seeds a day. 1 to 2 figs a day. All these things move the bowel. And then have something in the diet that's got some culture in it that helps those good probiotics and those good prebiotics. So plain yogurt or kefir, which is actually a Balkan drink that has many times more good flora and fauna than plain yogurt. That's readily available from a health food shop, and it's spelled Kefir. And avoiding white foods and avoiding junk foods, avoiding fizzy drinks and drinks with colourings in, that all will help the gut and will help constipation.
Fantastic information, Michèle. If you'd like to know more about constipation and other digestive issues and Michèle Wolff, please go to her webpage on our website, healthwellbeingandlifestyle.com.au. And after the break, we have another interesting guest with another interesting topic.
Stay tuned. After the break, root cause and somatic therapist Nicole Healy will be talking about navigating grief of loving someone in addiction. Welcome back. Our second guest is root cause and somatic therapist Nicole Healy, and she will be talking about navigating grief of loving someone in addiction. Welcome, Nicole.
Thank you for having me.
So talk to me a little bit about what is addiction and what is it to mean to navigate grief of someone who's still alive?
So addiction really is any behaviour that we have a craving for, that when we partake in that behaviour we find relief, and will continue to do it even though it has a negative or a heavy impact on other areas of our life. And it's important to note that addiction is in a spectrum, so at the lower end of the scale will be things like scrolling on your phone, maybe working too many hours, those lower impact type of behaviours. And the other end of the scale is things like drugs, alcohol, gambling, porn, that will have a heavier impact on your life. And those are the addictions that generally have a stigma attached to them, which quite often can keep families, loved ones, even the person in addiction hiding that behaviour away. Now, understanding addiction for me meant that I understood myself more and realised that I had carried an addiction to food for most of my life. And this began when I was around 4 and my father suddenly passed away. And everybody came, as they do, and they brought lots of food and lots of sometimes sort of food. And I had been spending my life trying to recreate the love and the support that I received through the food. So as a 4-year-old, I just knew that I wanted to feel that support again, and I have lived that. So whenever I have felt angry, anxious, hurt, I have turned to food to soothe myself. And understanding that has meant that I can show myself compassion, and then that compassion has also been able to extend towards my partner with his addiction as well. So hopefully when people understand that, they can be more compassionate towards themselves and their loved one. And navigating the grief really is having this person that you love start to maybe change in behaviour, maybe feel more distant, maybe you're not really included in what's going on in their life anymore, maybe they're not involved in family events, maybe they just feel like even though they're sitting near you, they're a million miles away. And the way that we can feel about that is very similar to grieving someone who maybe has passed, where we will feel sad, maybe anxious, maybe confused, and that can bring on the despair of not knowing how to support them and what to do, and usually trying to navigate it on our own because we maybe feel there's too much of a stigma to reach out, and that can be a really heavy place to find yourself in.
And you did mention stigma just now. What does that mean? I mean, is there still a very big stigma when it comes to admitting that, oh, you know what, I'm struggling a little bit as well. I'm trying to navigate these feelings. How do I do that?
I think the stigma firstly comes with addiction and the judgment that we may feel, and it might be there, it might not, but we do see it in a lot in society where there is judgment or people think addiction is a choice, and families maybe feel that it's a failure on their part, especially if it's their child. So they maybe don't want to reach out. So that adds to the grief as well, that you're navigating it alone. But understanding that it's not a choice. If you think about my story, that 4-year-old didn't choose to use food as a way to soothe herself. Someone who maybe finds themselves in drug addiction won't choose drug to be the thing that soothes them. It's just the thing that works. So hopefully understanding that, you can see addiction a bit differently and maybe feel more willing or more safe to reach out to loved ones. So if you think back to the story of me as a 4-year-old using food, a 4-year-old doesn't consciously choose to use food as a way to soothe herself. It is just something that was there, that brought relief, that has continued to soothe me throughout my life. And I'm really grateful for it, because I think, how would I have navigated so many challenging situations without that there is a support? Now, quite often for families too, the stigma that is attached to addiction will lead them to navigating in silence, and maybe that can lead to other things like feeling depressed, feeling isolated, feeling heartbroken, disengaging from life because they feel like they're almost running on empty, just trying to get through all the chaos and all the events that comes with loving someone in addiction. And I think it's really important to give yourself some grace with that and understand it's not a situation you chose to be in. Your loved one didn't choose it either, but really important for us loved ones to go, well, I didn't choose to be here. I'm going to give myself some grace with this, and maybe try to start to think about, what can I do that is going to help me, even in little ways. That can be something that you maybe enjoyed doing before you started to feel lost. It might be something new you might want to try that feels it can bring you some comfort, or it feels safe.
Do you have any advice for our viewers? Anyone who might be navigating this kind of grief, what can they do? What next steps can they take?
I think the first step is to be really aware of how you are actually feeling, maybe check in. And if you are noticing that you're maybe not coping and feeling like you're engaging in life, maybe you feel like you're just surviving rather than thriving, to first thing, think about getting some professional support. There is lots of great people out there that can support you. I think also too, to give yourself some kindness, to understand this is a really challenging situation, and I know it's hard to reach out, but find some safe spaces, whether that's loved ones that when you do talk to them, you feel heard and valued, because the last thing that we need is judgment. We are already living a life where we do already feel a lot of that, and that's not very helpful. So just be really kind to self, get that professional support, and hopefully things can start to turn around for you.
Thank you so much for joining us, Nicole.
Thank you for having me.
If you'd like to know more about navigating grief of loving someone with an addiction or about Nicole, you can check out her webpage on our website, healthwellbeingandlifestyle.com.au, and we'll be back after a short break with another interesting guest and great topic.
Stay tuned. After the break, naturopath, respiratory specialist and published author Julia Rudakova will be answering the question, is asthma for life? Welcome back. Our last guest today is naturopath, respiratory specialist and published author Julia Rudakova, and she will be answering the question, is asthma for life? Welcome, Julia.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, is it true? Is asthma for life?
So let's look at what asthma is and break it down from there. So asthma is a normal body response to a trigger. It could be chemical trigger, it could be a virus, could be hormones, could be emotions, could be a physical exercise. It can be dust, pollen, any irritant in the environment. And the body's natural response is to expel it, to constrict the airways, and to produce mucus. Bring it up, to take it out, to moisten the airways. And when that happens, we're forced to cough. The breathing changes. Sometimes it's harder to exhale. Sometimes for some people with asthma symptoms, it's harder to inhale. So it varies from person to person. And we need to break that vicious cycle of overbreathing when an asthmatic person gets into asthma symptoms for a prolonged period of time. When it settles in and the body starts breathing differently on a regular basis, even between asthma onsets. We start breathing differently. We're breathing more shallowly and sometimes with more force.
Is it possible to break the cycle of asthma?
Yes, of course it is. And that vicious cycle of overbreathing, I just want to break it down a little bit. What happens is that the chemoreceptors in the respiratory part of the brain, they detect how much carbon dioxide is there in the blood at all times. So it's mostly about carbon dioxide, not oxygen, right? When we think about what pushes us to take that next breath, people think, well, it's oxygen levels, it's carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is an amazing chemical and it's underutilized by people. And with the vicious cycle of overbreathing and mouth breathing, what happens is we lose that carbon dioxide, and it is a muscle relaxant. So when we talk about asthma, we think relaxation of the respiratory system, opening up the airways. To open them up, we need to relax the muscles of the bronchi. And to do that, we need to utilize that carbon dioxide. And to do that, we need to retrain the chemoreceptors in the respiratory part of the brain, and that's where the Buteyko breathing method comes in super handy, because there are certain exercises that we do. It's a progression. We move forward with the difficulty of the exercises. So to retrain the receptors, you need to be able to be tolerant to carbon dioxide. So the epidemic currently in the world is carbon dioxide intolerance. That pushes you to breathe fast, to breathe forcefully, to breathe a lot. And overbreathing, I always compare it to overeating. It's just as detrimental for our health on a very basic physiological chemical level. And to be able to do those exercises, you do not need any special physical preparation. As I said, we can start where the person is at, and that will break that cycle of overbreathing and bring the body back into the functional pattern, so that you breathe utilizing the right muscles, because that's very important for the chemistry in the body. when we breathe, we engage the diaphragm. And when the diaphragm is engaged, that means that the air is moved, is circulating in the lungs properly. And the most blood vessels in the lungs we have in the lower lobes where the diaphragm is sitting. So using the right muscles, using the diaphragm is very important for establishing good chemistry in the body, and using the right organs, using the nose and doing it properly at a proper rate.
So what are some tips for people that are suffering with asthma symptoms?
I always say it's to educate yourself. Educate yourself about how your body works, what is actually happening when you have an asthma onset. And because asthma is considered to be a life-threatening condition, because breathing is the most vital function in the body. We can't survive for longer than 3 minutes without taking a breath. An average person with an average physiology, that's our time. To be able to hold that physiology, you need to know what is happening and not to freak out, and know what you can do. And I want to give you an example. When my youngest son was dealing with asthma and I was helping him with various tools that I have under my belt, and that's when I started really actively using the Buteyko method, the Buteyko technique. And we went on a school camp with him, and I was one of the parent helpers. And out of nowhere, he had been asthma-free for about 3 years before that. And because of the environment, you know, the stress of the first school camp, he was so excited. And also just living without me in a separate room, and all the dust in the old mattresses and all rugs there in the room, that triggered his old asthma patterns. And on day 2, when they were having a fishing trip, on the way back, I could see, and I was there with him with that group, and I could see his face went white and he was struggling to take the next breath. And we just sat down on the log there on the beach, and because we didn't have Ventolin with us, he was asthma-free, he had been for a few years. And we started doing that Buteyko exercise. And it's very important for people who use Ventolin, and because you don't know how much is left, and you can help yourself with that while you're waiting for help. So we started doing that, and the color came back to his face. His lips became red again, he started breathing, and we could walk on to the group. And I think it's just such a great example about educating yourself, learning those techniques that can help you to live a healthier life. And as always, seek advice of a health professional.
Thank you so much for your time, Julia. If you'd like to know more about asthma and Julia, you can visit her webpage on our website, healthwellbeingandlifestyle.com.au. And now we'll say goodbye until next week.
If you'd like to know more about our show, please like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel.